Okay, I think I finally got it to go. If you're out there, drop a note in the comments so I know that it's working. Is it working? Haha. Hi, babe. Haha. Cool. Awesome. Hi, Carolyn. Oh, awesome. Here we are live. This is my first time, well, my second time doing this. You're live with Bowie and Miles. All right. Happy Pride. So I thought I'd take a little bit of time to, first off, explain why I decided to write down my story. I think our stories are so important, and part of the reason, I really appreciated Gay Pride last year because we came back to this idea of a march, and that we're marching for human rights. But I also think there's something really important about celebrating, and I think it's radical to celebrate the queer, any kind of queer, the queer lifestyle, because oftentimes in queer people's lives, the things that are celebrated in all other lives very easily and very freely are not celebrated in our lives. Love, marriage, kids. In fact, they're not only not celebrated, but they kind of cause the opposite. They cause stress or fear in the people around us. So I felt like it would be a really, like an act of radical love for me to write down my story, because when I was growing up, I didn't have a lot of reverberation or resonance. I grew up without any role models. I grew up in Colombia, South America, and being gay was never spoken about unless it was spoken about in derogatory terms, and transness didn't really exist. So I thought, as a trans queer person, that one of the most radical forms of activism I could take would be to write down my story. And so I've written it down, and I thought for Pride that I would spend a few Wednesdays with you and just read a couple of excerpts from it, and and then I thought, well, it would be, I've seen a lot of my friends start to post a little bit of their story, which is so uplifting. I love people's stories, are so meaningful, and we all have such different stories. So then I thought, well, what if we hashtag them and put them in one place where we could all see them? So I thought maybe the hashtag my story matters. So if you want to write down your story, or if you want to talk about your story, or share a little bit about yourself, put the hashtag my story matters and tag me so that I can know that that's happening. And I'm super happy to be here with you. So here's a little bit of Beautiful Monster, my upcoming memoir. So, Bug, what have you been up to? Dad asked laboriously, his breath so short now he barely got the words out. My heart pounded in my chest, waiting to see what he would say next. His eyes sparkled with mischief in the late afternoon light, the way they always had when we were on the verge of one of our heart-to-hearts. My undiscussed letter hung in the air between us. I wasn't sure if we were heading into the mire, but figured I would follow his lead. He gave me the same look he always had, a look reserved only for me. I knew it and loved him for it. For the first time ever, our complicity lay completely naked, all cards out on the table. A timid new version of us emerging, father and son, along with the irresistible invitation to parry. He was more tender with me now than ever, his manner so sweet my eyes welled up. The week had been charged by death's painfully serrated edges, a lens narrowed into sharp, unforgiving focus. I'd known I had to tell him before coming home. I was running out of time. If I didn't, I would live to regret it, and there's no living where regret resides. He deserved a shot at knowing me, really knowing me, in whatever time we had left. I owed him that much, which was why I sent the letter. We tallied forth bravely into the darkness of these uncertain waters. I'm writing a memoir, I countered playfully. A memoir? He looked me straight in the eye, adding in a low rumble, and what do you have to write about? His jagged breath punctuated time, face flushed with pride and anticipation. I held his gaze. We burst out laughing. Laughter that quickly turned into gut-wrenching coughs, his lungs trying to escape the cavity of his chest through his mouth, his fists remaining clenched tightly on his thighs, my heart cracking into further disrepair with every nasty heave. Oxygen tubes went flying onto his forehead. When it finally receded, after what felt like an eternity, I rushed to pull them back into place and slide the blanket back over his thighs. The compressor, working at its maximum capacity, no longer able to supply the air he thirstily needed, a lifeline amidst constant heavy panting in the tiny lungfuls that were still available to him. Eyes bloodshot, voice thinned to a barely audible thread, he thanked me. I leaned in, one arm draped over his slumped shoulder, the side of my head pressed up against his temple. I could feel the frail sliver of life pulling away ever so slightly, even as his shoulders relaxed a little, thinking to myself, touché, old man, touché. Relieved our shared shining sense of humor hadn't killed him. This was gonna hurt. On a balmy Sao Paulo morning in Brazil, an eerie silence befell a small, sterile hospital room. Stillness hung in the humid air for an infinite second, a caesura, a gasp. Time stretched out like taffy, and just like that, wah! My newborn wail and first song bounced off the walls, slamming the room along with those in it back into the forward motion of existence. I was birthed. Mom huffed and puffed and squeezed my dad's hand so hard she rearranged his bones. My shriek muffled another sound that underscored the chaos, an electric crackle, like white noise rumbling through the spirit world, imperceptible to human senses. Out on the fields, horses sniffed at the air, whipping their tails impatiently. Fluttering exhales of mist through tapioca lips, they could smell the snag in the fabric of time. The ancients, gaze drawn toward the horizon, awaited the inevitable. The very moment, though time is a slippery and ever-changing thing, when dimensions converged. I broke time as we know it. Well, I didn't break it. The deeper, more ancient part of me did. The me that has always been, has never changed, and never will, because it cannot be affected by time or circumstance. That part, it had a different idea of what was to pass, and being timeless had more clout. Anyway, I guess it doesn't matter why it broke, it just did. The system, the code, the compact or contract, or whatever you want to call the unspoken universal law set forth by the order of things. Nobody meant for it to happen, but it did. My spirit bifurcated, though not entirely. Two halves of a whole were separated yet overlapped in the present moment like the penumbra in an eclipse, darkness dissolving into light. Or is it the other way around? Leaving me, perhaps forever, between worlds. Though not in the way you might think. This gray, viscous state of becoming would grant me permissions others did not have. It would allow me to shapeshift in a way others would never dream. I would glide seamlessly between certain worlds, unfettered by Newtonian restrictions and regulations, more in sync with the chaos and uncertainty of the quantum realm of time and space, for they are expressions of the same thing. A gift reserved for a small few, because only a small few look for it, seek it out, unlock it. The gift lay hidden, in wait, only allowing itself to be seen in odd, seemingly insignificant ways, while time chipped away at me, offering lots of questions with few answers. I would come to learn not only that I could slow time down, but I could fold her onto herself, overlap her to live several spaces at once. In the beginning, though, it seemed as if time simply refused to follow her normal rules around me, which was frustrating. She ruined watches, clocks, and really any timepiece in my vicinity, sending everything around me reeling into timelessness. Electronics would go crazy, behaving wildly, making it feel like she didn't want me here, like she'd never intended me to get through the snag, until I realized much later she was rigged in my favor. It turned out she was calling me, leaving signs, leading my awareness there to my gift, demanding that I remember. In the world that was water, truth was thick, like time stacked and folded, like silence, sound inverted. My arrival was the crowning event of our stay in Brazil, before our family's imminent move to Venezuela. My parents had waited on my infant war cry, which ended their sunny, friend-filled 7-year tenure in the magical land of samba, beaches, and warm-blooded people who spoke in sloshy language that dribbled all over your senses and stuck to you like fresh pineapple juice, making you dizzy with pleasure. Our furniture was already well on its way to Caracas, and I was the last obstinate piece, refusing to fall obediently into place. First, there was the question of my name, and names are a serious question. My parents loved the name Mila, already made infamous by a Brazilian porn star in the late 70s. Not wanting to saddle me with that, they settled on Camila and called me Mila anyway, the best of both worlds. There was a second impasse, more stubborn than the first though, one having to do with clan and country. In Colombia, people have 2 last names, the father's followed by the mother's maiden name, in that order. The 2 together comprise one single last name. In Brazil, they do it backwards. The child's first last name is the mother's maiden name, with the father's last name appearing as a sad second. My sister, 4.5 years older than me, was already Susana Borrero Echeverri, with Dad's last name parading happily out front and center. When I was born, Dad felt he couldn't possibly be expected to explain a newborn with the name Camila Echeverri Borrero to friends and family, even though Mom did all the work of carrying me and having me come out of her very tiny body. What would people think? Nope, it simply wouldn't do. It was a question of clarity, really, nothing more. If a child comes out of a woman, but doesn't have the man's last name, does the child even exist? Something had to give, but because I broke the system, my not yet legal existence further delayed our move to Caracas because Dad couldn't fill out my registration without ending up with someone else's baby, namely my mom's. How could it be so hard to name a baby anyway? He took his pleas to the Colombian consulate where things played out like a good old soap opera. There he sat, in the clerk's office, worried music swells, sweating profusely into his button-down, pant to the moisture of his upper lip, day in and day out, bringing the secretary coffee and sweets and asking her if there was any other way to file paperwork that would yield a child clearly belonging to him, a proper child. The answer was always the same, nope. Close-up of eyeballs darting left and right, no amount of coffee or cookies would change that. Yet he persisted. Every morning, these events repeated with little to no variation. After 2 weeks of this, one morning, a solution came to her. She was a nice person after all, and wanted this for him as much as he did, mostly because, well, she wanted him out of her office. She waved him up to the counter and said, "Dr. Carlos." Anyone with status in Latin America is a doctor, except in his case it was also true since he had a PhD. "Have you considered filing Camila's registration form with only your last name on it?" Dad leaned in, examining her with an eagle eye. "I can do that?" "Yes, I believe it's been done before. It isn't ideal, but they'll accept it. You'd be filing as if you were a single dad. Camila just wouldn't legally have a mother to speak of, on paper." Sweat dripped down the sides of his face. He had been due in Venezuela weeks ago. No need to consult Mom or anything. She wouldn't mind, or would she? "Let's do it." A swift wave of a pen later, and I forever became Camila Borrero. On paper, a motherless child with a loving, living mother, and already an improper Colombian citizen, as it was unheard of to have only one last name. With that, my fate was sealed, though really it was more like a destiny, a stamp of approval on a pre-existing condition of illegitimacy from the universe that would linger, though it's possible that the next moment in time sealed the deal even further. There's only one other thing. announced the clerk. My father squinted at her. It sounded bad. What's that? You're past the grace period for filing Camila's registration. I'm going to have to fine you. Eyeballs widened. Averse to paying anything extra ever and well-versed in the art of making fines disappear, Dad pleaded, Ay, senora, is there no way around this? Would you help me? I would be so grateful to you. You see, I'm expected in Venezuela for a new job and have already stayed far past my allotted time. You understand. Moving a whole family to a new country along with a newborn. He flashed a pathetic look at her, long lashed eyes with eyebrows drawn high on his forehead, and topped it off with a winning grin. She caved. Well, there's one way around it. You could change her birthday to today. Lowering her voice, confiding in him now, I'm not supposed to do this, but considering the circumstances, I think we can make an exception. She crinkled her nose and slid the forms under the glass window for him. Sounds of a record screeching as everything lurched forward. In that moment, a shearing force organized the chaos into a divine order different from what was, making unseen things fully expressed, while others shifted into ghost-like, paper-thin expressions of themselves. It's a volatile place, the world of nebulous space inside the Big Bang. Existence doesn't come without its risks, and there's always a dab of the unaccounted for that sneaks into the mix, the magic. Unforeseen things happen along the way that shift even the universe's plans sometimes ever so slightly. Muito obrigado. And just like that, one mother short and having been birthed twice, but only once on paper, within 2 weeks of this life, I was finally deemed fit to join the realm of reality, having complied fully, though messily, with its natural laws. Those tiny inconsistencies would continue to surface throughout my life, my own reincarnation in action. Why wait till death? Some of us don't have that kind of time. Live several lives simultaneously in this lifetime. That's the way to do it. Now, finally, everything appeared normal, except it wasn't, or was it? Who's to say what normal feels or looks like? Like a ball bouncing off the walls until it stops, actions continue past their inception, the butterfly effect. That's the thing about karma. We weave ourselves into it like worms. My father's choice to course correct may have been the logical one, but the universe cares little for logic. Energy doesn't just suddenly disappear, it transforms. I think I'm gonna pause there, team. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed story time with Miles Barrero. And if you're around next Wednesday at 12:15, I'm going to be doing a different excerpt. And then the next Wednesday after that as a Pride celebration. All right? Love you all. And I see you, Sanaya. Yes, hi, Arthur. Amazing. So good to see everybody. Tim, I saw you as well. All right, darlings. Be brave, kind, and awkward, like Brene Brown says. All right? Ciao. Uh-huh.